Hello, viewers. This is Passion 9. The chillest month of the year is nearly at its end. So, today I wanted to talk about Silent Hill 3, the survival horror masterpiece from a certain company that shall not be named. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to cover this part up because I don't care about that part. We can cover this. We can cover this. I just want to talk about this, not this. We can cover the bottom part here. This little red spot. Pay no attention to this little red spot here. Okay? That's not important to the discussion. Anyway, Silent Hill 3 is notable for me personally because this is probably the last survival horror game that has truly frightened me. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that it's the last game to scare me. No. What I mean is, it's the last game that has truly terrified me. It is the last game that made my soul tremble. Okay? Now, there have been plenty of games since then that have maybe made me jump, gave me some goosebumps, made me, hesitant to open a door, turn a corner, or whatever, here and there. But nothing has gotten to me like this game has since this game was released. Way back in 2000 goddamn 3. Because that's when this game came out. So it makes me a little sad. Makes me a little sad that no horror game I've ever played, at least, has been able to replicate the sheer level of fear that this thing has. And it's a real shame because, Konami, I guess we do have to mention their name, don't we? Did release an HD collection containing Silent Hill 2 and 3. Not sure why they excluded 4, but we're not going to talk about that. And did a horrible job porting these games to the PS3. There were many graphical issues. They kind of ruined the art direction with, the lighting was way too bright, so it killed the horror atmosphere. They fucked up the fog effects that were vital to the games. And, even replaced certain key art assets with really shoddy ones because they didn't have the old source code or whatever. Yeah, they just didn't give a shit, is essentially what I'm saying. And that's a real shame because these games really do deserve to be, preserved and carried over. It's why I treasure these PS2 copies because really they are the only way to enjoy these games in their original splendor. Particularly the game's art director, the art director behind all 4 of the original Silent Hills back when they were still made by the original team. Masahiro Ito is his name, was actually shocked. He did comment online about the HD ports and said he was shocked that they were released in that state. The art director himself was displeased with it. He's like, wow, they really just released them like that? So you fucked up when the original artist himself doesn't know what to make of it. It's like, what did you do to my games? But what are you gonna do? Konami is Konami, and they are the worst. But Silent Hill 3, man, this game was interesting because, first off, it had you playing as this teenage girl, Heather, who really brought something kind of fresh to the series. In the first 2 games you play as, 2 middle-aged dudes. There's Harry Mason from the first game and James Sunderland from the second, and they're both looking for somebody. They both come to Silent Hill looking for somebody, Harry was looking for his lost daughter, Cheryl. James was looking for his wife Mary. And, now with Silent Hill 3, it does change up the dynamic a bit because Heather does not come to Silent Hill looking for anyone. She comes to Silent Hill looking for herself. Because, as it turns out, her past is very closely tied to the events of the first game. And, there are many people that are sort of two minds of this. The fact that the game technically acts as a direct sequel to the original. Whereas Silent Hill 2 did not in any way reference the first game. It was kind of its own original plot. And I do think Silent Hill 2 has the best narrative in the series. I do think it has the best standalone plot. However, I do largely like the way Silent Hill 3 executes its continuation of the original game. I don't think it's as good as Silent Hill 2's. I don't think it has the emotional weight that game has. But I do think it manages to handle that pretty well without kind of ruining the ambiguity of, that's needed for Silent Hill. So yeah, Heather brings an interesting dynamic to it. She doesn't know who she is. She has this past that is closely linked to the town, and when you start the game, you're not even in Silent Hill. You're actually just in a shopping mall. And, she has no idea what's going on. Her world is suddenly twisted by the dark powers of the town, even though she's not even there. She's in some other place. And she was taken in by Harry Mason, the main character of the first game. And, she finds out that the cult of the original game, the evil cult, is still around and is looking for her. So there is some degree of mystery to the plot, but it is largely a sequel to the original game. So I think that's probably the only main criticism I could level at it is that it's not as bold with its narrative as Silent Hill 2. It is largely kind of repeating a lot of themes from the original game to some extent. But again, I didn't mind this because I really liked the cult stuff from the original game. I think that kind of does have its own charms or whatever. But yeah, this game, it is one of the scariest games I've ever played, like just hands down. Which is interesting because it's not the subtlest game in the series. I think 2 would probably be considered the most subtle Silent Hill game. Like, it has the most subtle atmosphere. You don't encounter as many enemies. The enemies you do encounter are not that tough or aggressive, really. And they're more pitiful than hard to kill or anything. It's more about, like, this somber, melancholy tone, which makes sense because James Sunderland was a very sorrowful, melancholy character who was dealing with the death of his wife, and then he gets this letter, and he comes to the town essentially looking for a ghost of the past. It's just a game about regret and about guilt. And Silent Hill 3 is kind of the inverse of that. Again, Heather's not looking for anyone. She hasn't experienced that same thing at the game's outset. So it's more like she gets pulled into this darkness rather than seeking it out. And it's interesting because the atmosphere does kind of reflect that. It's far more sort of angry and aggressive and violent than Silent Hill 2, or even the first game in some respects. It's definitely the bloodiest game in the series. It's got some of the most shocking imagery. And again, Masahiro Ito just freaking kills it with the art. I mean, every environment and every, especially when the game shifts over to that dark world and everything is, pulsating and scary, and there's, these terrifying monsters your eyes can barely make out everywhere, and the sound design is insane. Once again, the soundtrack is entirely composed by Akira Yamaoka, who has done all 4 of the original games. He worked with the team, and then even contributed some music to Homecoming and Shattered Memories, which I thought, those 2 games sucked, but the music was still good, at least because Akira Yamaoka did compose for those two games. So even with the original team gone by that point, like that was the one silver lining those two games had. It's like, well, they still sound good because he still got Akira Yamaoka doing the soundtrack. And speaking of which, this game actually comes. It's something I should emphasize. Have a look in here. Uh, Aside from a full color manual, which you just don't see anymore, games don't do this anymore. They don't come with full color manuals anymore. Uh, I don't know what happened. I guess the, you know, economics got in the way. But, I mean, you got that. And then, something that really was impressive, even when this game came out, it has two CDs. And one CD is the main game, one is the fucking soundtrack. You get a bonus CD containing the game's soundtrack for free. You know, right there. It doesn't cost extra. It's not a part of some pre-order deal. You just get the soundtrack as a gift. They just bundle it with the game. You get a free soundtrack CD with tons of music on it from the game. And that's pretty killer because the Silent Hill series has some of the best goddamn music of any game out there. So, pretty goddamn impressive that they were, I think it's probably just a case of the composer just being so damn proud of it. He was like, yeah, can we put this in there for free? And it's like, that's freaking awesome. Like, I still look at this and I'm like, how many games, even at that time, let alone today, would give you a free soundtrack without like some pre-order bullshit or like, oh, you gotta pay extra, you gotta order this shit. No, you just open the freaking game, you pay your $60 and you had a free soundtrack to go along with your game. Amazing. Fucking amazing. So, it's just something I gotta point out. Uh, just what a great package it was. And the game itself, again, I think it's funny because while Silent Hill 2 is probably the best game in the series for me, if we're just talking about just a really great story, I think 3 still delivers in the execution. The plot is still gripping. The graphics are great. And it differed from Silent Hill 2 in that I think it was just more fun to play. You know, it was more replayable. You had a lot of secrets, fun Easter eggs. There's like a bunch of really good New Game Plus content as well, which the first two Silent Hill games, I don't think they had much in that regard. So there's a lot more content in this one too. They really went to town with that. So it's probably the most robust Silent Hill game in the series. And I remember like all these like fun outfits you can unlock, secret special weapons, just all kinds of fun stuff. So it also packed a lot into one game. And they just don't make them like that anymore. And the atmosphere is just incredible. Like there are moments in this game that just had me like panicking with the controller in my hands, like panicking to, you enter a room. I remember like some of the scares in particular. There's a point where you go back to the hospital from Silent Hill 2. The Brookhaven Hospital, I think it's called. And it looks like, in a lot of ways, it looks like the one from Silent Hill 2, but there's a point where, in both games, where it shifts over, it becomes a creepier place. You enter like a darker version of the hospital. And in Silent Hill 2, again, reflect that melancholy tone. It's like, it's just kind of this dreary, like, rotted out place. It's like the building has been left to like rot, like it's abandoned, and there's just like closed up and bolted up stuff everywhere, and it's like raining, and it's just got this feeling of sorrow to it and abandonment. And in Silent Hill 3, you go back to that same hospital in the same town, but because this is a different character you're playing as, it's a different psyche that is triggering all these like psychological horror things. The version of the hospital that Heather sees is like it descends into like this horrifying bloody nightmare, just full of like these horrifying nurses carrying like guns and shit, and there's like there's like walls bleeding, like actually bleeding as you walk through the hallways. It's just nightmarish stuff. And I remember just panicking, just like barely being able to hold the controller. I was like, what the fuck? How do I get out of here? And again, it's just something I haven't experienced in any other horror franchise, you know? Like, there's been some good stuff in recent years, sure. You know, Resident Evil has been killing it lately. But as I've said in the past, Resident Evil is its own kind of horror. You know, it's more George A. Romero. You know what I mean? It's more schlock horror, whereas Silent Hill is more like shit. It's more psychological. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining horror. You know what I mean? It's really crazy stuff. And to me, Silent Hill 3 was the pinnacle of that. Like, it really was an impressive game for the hardware at that time. And I don't think anything has come along that's really affected me in that way. Certainly not something like Dead Space or any of like the modern amnesia style horror games I've played in recent years. It's like, you know, they feel kind of one track. Silent Hill had so many influences it took from that were so brilliantly executed and with such care, you know. Now, hopefully, somewhere down the line, the chairman or CEO or whoever of Konami, you know, will get the boot in the years to come so that they can get some young blood in there to finally, you know, course correct the company, and maybe, just maybe, Silent Hill will come back to life. Maybe. But, wow. Almost dropped it. That's all for now, viewers. See you next time.